Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video, well, guess what? I'm working on Jade. Now, many of you have seen the videos on this car. There's over 100 videos on YouTube about this car from start to relative finish. The problem I have with this car is the differential is making noise. Now, I've done a video on that previously. I've also done videos where I've been driving the car and you can hear the whine and the sounds that's coming from the rear of the car. And somebody is interested in buying this car. Actually, I have multiple people interested in buying this car. Me, I can't sell it with that noise. I don't trust it. I don't know why it's doing it. And the problem ultimately is the rear end housing or the rear end assembly is out of a 59 Mercury station wagon. What that means is it is extra narrow. Now, apparently back in the day, people would put these rear end housings in these Mustangs to put wider tires underneath, and that makes sense. However, the tire and wheel combination that I have, which are 17x9s in the back, I think it's a 4.5 inch offset, they are only able to fit because spacers on the end of the axle. So you have your brake drum and then a spacer, and I think it's a inch and a quarter. That's a lot. Combination of that problem, the noise, and also the differential itself is I believe a war housing, or W as they called them. You know, these castings would have an N for nodular. This one has a W, and that's an old casting that nobody really wants. They're not strong enough if you want to put any kind of serious torque under them, or load or anything like that. So my plan is I'm going to take out the rear end of Jade and replace it with a factory 8-inch rear end. Now I have one of those. It is currently in the red car that I called Fangled, and that car is not going to be built like it is. It's going to go a different direction, and I plan to save the rear end out of that. I did a video on this housing, this 8-inch housing, where I took everything apart. Well, I say everything. I took apart the pinion and I replaced some bearings and a crush sleeve and a few other things. However, that is on Patreon. So if you're interested in looking at that, go look at my Patreon account or sign up for Patreon and you can have a look at that video. So let me show you the current status of the 8-inch rear end. Just a quick look at Jade. No, she is not blue. Alright, so here is Fangled. Now, what I ended up doing was taking apart, pulling out the chunk, of course, pulled the pinion out, replaced the seal, replaced the bearing. One bearing was bad, the crush sleeve, and put everything back together. Had a friend help me out with that. Resealed everything, new gaskets everywhere, put it back in. Here I took off the backing plates, put new seals in, new paper gasket that goes between the flange for the housing and the backing plate. And I plan to put new brakes on here. Now, part of the problem I've run into is the brake assemblies that were on this are missing parts. I've taken it all out, and I'm not using much of anything from that, but I'm missing parts. As it is, I can leave it alone until I get it back underneath Jade. What I want to do is take the parts that are in Jade, because those are all new, and replace everything here with those parts. Now, another thing that I'm doing, because Jade tends to sit just a little bit off, I didn't want to reuse the leaf springs, and I did not want to use the leaf springs that were in this car. So these are brand new leaf springs from CJ Pony. These are a 4-stack, which would have been stock. It has these shackle extenders on it, and when I took everything out, I removed all those components. I put in new leaf springs temporarily just to have a platform to work on this housing. So I put it in the car, bolted the differential housing back in with brand new U-bolts, cleaned up base plates or mount plates, and just put everything back up in there so I could easily handle setting the differential in. Alright, so that's where we're at. The plan now that I'm at this point is to swap everything out, meaning I'm going to take Jade back outside, take Fangled off of the lift, bring Jade back in and put it on the lift and start removing the differential housing. This car, I can take the housing out easily out here on the floor, just jack it up, pull the bolts, and roll the housing out. So just an update on the car itself. This car is a factory V8 automatic with AC. That was the only options it had. So I converted it over to disc brakes using CSRP. There's a video on that. All the front suspension is new, everything except for maybe the drag link. I also converted it to Borgeson power steering. So there's the steering box. I think I have a couple of videos on that. Underneath, I have replaced both left and right floor pans, floor supports, and torque boxes. Videos on all of that stuff as well. Moving to the rear of the car, this is that rear end that I was talking about that I'm not going to use. I'll show you more detail on that in a minute. The springs I never messed with until today, so those will be being replaced. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep these shocks because they're rather stiff and I don't like that stiff ride. New gas tank, video on that. Of course, I had exhaust made for it. And everything in the back, the rear frame rails are original. You can see it even has the tie downs left on it, and it looks like my muffler guy used one of those to hold the exhaust, which is fine. The quarter panels have been replaced. The wheel houses, outer wheel houses, the tail panel has been replaced as well, and this valance is also aftermarket. So the exhaust on it is thrush welded mufflers, 2.5 inch. The headers are Patriot, which were bought through Summit, and when I opened the box it said Patriot on the packaging. The engine was rebuilt by a friend of mine. This is a 302 with a little bigger cam. There's a video on the break-in, all that sort of thing. Like I said, there's over 100 videos on this car by itself. In the front here, this front valance, this is custom made by me. This is all metal, and I like the opening style of the Shelby, but I hand formed all the pieces here and welded them in. So that's a one-off. The grill is also a Shelby style grill, but I took their grill that was sold through NPD and I reshaped it because it's not wide enough to fit this opening. So I remade it to fit the opening. So there is a mesh or honeycomb style grill in this. It does have vintage air on it, so there's videos on all of that. The radiator is an aftermarket aluminum radiator with dual electric fans. I'm okay with this thing. I don't think it's the perfect choice, but it is what it is at this point. I will be doing a little bit more work on those as well. The water pump is a later model water pump, and the water neck you can see is on the driver's side instead of the passenger side. So on the early cars, the water necks were both on the passenger side. So new alternator, all kinds of goodies under here, but I'm going to remove that rear end and try to get the other one in place. Alright, I have made some progress. So I unbolted the U-bolts and separated the drive shaft. I took a small thin piece of wood and put it on top of the mufflers, so the drive shaft is still in place, it's just above them. I also removed the bolt or the nuts that hold the shocks on. I am not sure if I'm going to use these shocks or not. These were very stiff. They did not give much ride. or good ride. And then in the back here I have removed the bolt or the nuts off of these shackle mounts. Now these, I'm just noticing these appear to be just plates and bolts. So I'm not sure what the thickness here is. It's a little, I can't get 2 fingers in there. I can get my hand in, and the thickness of my fingers in there. And there's probably a 1/4 inch above that. Now what I'm doing is replacing everything. So I have new shackles, and I don't know what the dimension is on these. The bushings I've already put in the leaf springs that I'm using on the new stuff. So I will be using those shackles. And at this point, I'm really close to getting it out. The other thing that I did, I separated the brake lines because I want to reuse the lines that were on this housing, and I just took them out of the wheel cylinders and then just kind of hung them up here up above. So at this point, I really just need to let it down and get the bolts out that are holding the shackles in place and the front perch mounts. I did take the tires, of course, and wheels off. I wanted to show you this. This is the spacer. Let me do it from this side so you can see it a little better. This is the spacer that is on here, and I measured this. This is 1.25 inches. That's a lot. You know, this housing is much narrower. When I measured the other one, it was 59 3/8, and this one just to the outside was like 59 3/4. So 2.5 inches have been added to this to get it out to this point. So I don't know what I'm going to do with this. This will end up underneath fangled for now, just to make it roll around. Well, it came out. Probably a little more effort than I wanted, but the bolts come out fine. The bushings are worn, as you would normally expect. Up here, the brackets. This was a challenge, or will be a challenge, because the bolt is too long to come off. You know, this has been a problem with a lot of this stuff. I don't know how this was put together. You know, I replaced this drop-off panel, but they had to have put this in with a hole over here. I don't see how else you would do it, and I may have to cut those bolts off. That's always been a problem on these because of the limited space. This side will come off okay. The bushings probably all right, but I do have those new ones. And you know, it was never detailed. This was always kind of crusty, and I just left it like that. This is all overspray from when it was painted. It just brushes off. So I will go over this some more. There is some undercoating here coming loose. Not a big deal. You can see there's probably the original paint underneath this. I'll knock off any of the this undercoating here and protect this and respray it just to make it look nice. Everything else seems to be okay. I did find there was a little bit of grease on these bolts up here on this, so they must have put a little grease either to put them in, just maybe to keep it from squeaking or something. And other than that, things are looking pretty good. Now, I will have to put the tires and wheels back on that to roll it out of here. And of course the new one will have to come back out from under this car. That'll be pretty easy. And looking at these brackets, so this is what they had in there. And I don't know if it was a kit. I assume it was, but it is shorter than the original style. Do a comparison there. You can see, line up the top hole best I can, and it's just slightly shorter than what came in these originally, or at least this copy. So I'll get this stuff out of the way, probably back this car up slightly, get it up on jack stands, pull the assembly out, and of course clean up whatever I can underneath here. I did have somebody point out in one of the pictures that I posted that I never did put in the plugs, and I do have those. I just never got under here after I painted it. And also, I don't like these. I know I put these in upside down. I did that on purpose. These are supposed to be facing up, these block-off plates. I don't like these screws. I will probably cut these off, maybe leave a little bit sticking out. I don't like those. You know, even if you're just say working underneath something like this and you drag your head across that, boy, that's gonna tear you up quick. So I'll Zizwheel those down. Again, overspray. This is primer and paint from years and years ago. But yeah, I'm making progress. Alright, I have the front bolts in and I have the passenger side shackle in place. I wanted to show you this. Whenever you're doing these and you're using this replacement style, the trick is to put the bushings on the shackle and then snake it into the openings. And that way you're not fighting that bushing whenever you're trying to put this together. You're not trying to line up the bushing. So car's sitting a little bit, could come down just a little to make this easier, but basically that's all you got to do. Now the other bushing, I can slip it up inside. I know it's hard to see this, trying to get a much of an angle here as I can, but you can take the other bushing and get it up inside there. Now I pushed it in too far. I need to pull it back out a little bit. And it's hard to do this without putting my own head or whatever in the way. But now there's the other bushing. Get that in and slide everything over. Now again, this would be easier if it wasn't 100 degrees in here and I had the car sitting just a hair lower. Right now it's got tension on it and I'm having to push up on the spring, but you get the idea. So let me see if I can bump this down just a hair. And I am sweating like a pig under here. It's going. I just have to get some force behind it. And once I get the plate on, then I can tighten everything up. But you get the idea. Okay, the plate is on. I ended up taking just a handle from a wire brush and use some leverage off the frame and just push it on. Didn't really take much. Now nothing's tight yet. Now it's time to get it back up in the air. Woo! Let me tell you, I'm sweating way too much. Way too much. So there it is, up in place. Of course I'll have to hook up the brake lines and all that sort of thing. I did take the shocks off because they were fighting me, and that's not a fight that I wanted to have. So those are off. They're KYB gas shocks, but man, they are so stiff that they just don't give you a good ride. And of course I'll be working on the brakes and everything else, but for now I'm happy with how it looks and where it's at. And of course, don't forget, add gear oil. Now I've looked online. Basically what I found was 80W90 is sufficient, so that's what I'm using. Now I know there's probably a specific amount that would be in here. Typically what I was always taught was you put your finger in the hole and you should come out with residue or oil on the tip of your finger, like when you just kind of barely dip it in, or you can fill it up to where it flows out of the bottom of the hole. You don't want to have it too much, but that's your gauge typically. Excuse me. Didn't know I had that in me. Oh no. Like I said, you'll see it's still not showing on the tip yet. So I'll keep adding to it, and that's your gauge. Whenever you get to that point, stop and put the plug back in. All right, get the drive shaft back in. Fits nice. There's a difference. I wasn't sure. I should have checked that first. So the U-bolts are different. On the 9-inch, they're narrower. Weird. So I'm going to have to come up with some U-bolts to put this in. Well, I found some U-bolts at the auto parts store. So this is Dorman, part number 81004. So this gives me the U-bolts that I need at this point. I've already opened up one package and determined that they do fit. So now to put this together. There we go. There, that's better. And of course they do come with lock washers and new copper colored nuts. I'm sure they're not copper, that wouldn't make any sense, but they sure look pretty. Make sure the caps are inside the little tabs on the end so you don't have any problems later. Now this drive shaft, I did put a new U-joint in it previously. There's actually an old video of this where I replaced this U-joint. And I didn't use a press or anything. I used some sockets and a hammer and drove it out and drove it back in. Kind of old school method when you don't have a press, but you can do it. And I did it on the floor of the garage, and it hasn't been a problem. Done it that way. I grew up doing it that way, and that's probably the way I'll always do it until I eventually one day have a press for whatever happens. Now I don't know what the torque is on these. I'm not going to try to snap them off. I know that much. You got to be cautious sometimes, but these are not very large, and the only purpose is to keep the U-joint together with the yoke. So anyway, I'll just get them tight. Okay, I've managed to get, I think, just about everything taken care of that I needed to address with Jade, and I'm pretty happy with the results. I did have a problem with the horn. I'm going to show you what I did here in just a minute. Just give you another quick walk around of the car. Now, this steering wheel is, of course, an aftermarket steering wheel, and I found that there was a contact point inside for the positive wire, and it was just barely making contact with the piece of copper on the inside, and so I resoldered that. I managed to get a consistent 9 or 10 volts. I could not get 12 volts, so I decided to add a bus bar down there below the battery, and what I did with that, I moved some of the wires that I had up here at the solenoid down below, kind of cleaned it up just a little bit, and then I added another solenoid because I have two for the electric fans. I added another solenoid just for the horns. So I kept the original wire for the horns. I did not cut it. I just added a pigtail to it so that I could make that the trigger for the solenoid, and then coming off of the solenoid, which is down below, it's down there, coming off the solenoid, I gave power to a new set of wires. So I did not cut the harness. I just used the wiring as a trigger. So now I've got good horns, and I'm happy with that. Very happy with that. So yes, now I get to roll this back out and get the Cobra Jet back in here. I also will point out that putting on the leaf springs has leveled out the car. That was one of the things that was bothering me a lot, was the car was sitting crooked. I don't remember which way now, but now it appears that the new leaf springs have leveled it out. So I'm happy with all of that, and I'm looking forward to getting back in here on the Cobra Jet. Alright, that'll be the end of this video. Once again, thank you for watching. Leave a comment and a thumbs up. Let me know what you think about this car. As I said, I plan to put it up for sale here locally, and if that doesn't work out, I will pursue other options. So this car may be available to somebody out there in YouTube land. But for now, I'm sticking with just the local options, just to make it easier for me and everything else. But I want to thank all of you for watching, and I want to thank my patrons especially for helping me to continue to make these videos. I do share certain videos on Patreon only, so if you're interested in that, there is a link in the description below, and you can follow that to become a patron. So, as it is, that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.